Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cross Project Council's regular meeting call. Today is Tuesday, April 29th of 2025. So let's get started. Do we have any announcements for today?
Just a reminder, ticket sales are out for JSConf and sponsorships are still available. Who's coming on this call? Yeah.
I
Great.
haven't quite made a decision yet.
Oh, Toby.
Yeah,
Anyhow,
we'll figure it out.
cool. So yeah, and our program committee has been meeting. We have just a ton of great ideas coming through for keynote speakers. I know CFPs are coming, start coming in the door right away. So I don't have the timeline in front of me, but yeah, that's moving along. So we have a program committee meeting tomorrow.
And is the program committee public? I mean, can anyone join that call? How does that work?
Well, if you want to join, reach out to me and I can add you. It's not public just because we are talking about speakers and CFPs. So that's,
Well, sure,
but
sure, obviously.
yeah,
But
yeah,
if people are interested, they can still sort of
absolutely.
raise
Hit
their
me up
hand,
on
and
Slack. Yeah, hit me up on Slack
that
and I'll add you to the calendar invite.
that's what I wanted to make sure people
Yeah,
were
yeah,
aware of. Yeah. So I mean, I'm super excited. Also, I hope I can figure out a way to make it, but we'll have to figure this out. Yeah, and as Ethan was saying, a good reminder to submit CFPs. Yes, do this absolutely. Any other announcements? None. All right, wonderful. So moving on in the call, board meeting updates. So there was a board meeting. Joe, you were also in that board meeting. I was driving during the board meeting, and so my memory is kind of not the best. Anything that's relevant to the CPC that we can share?
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember what we talked about that would be open for public consumption. I can't think of anything. I need to take notes in the board meetings. Bring these back a little bit better. Robin, Ben, do you remember anything that we should bring up here?
Ben. Um, I think, what we can go back to doing with the regular CPC members is just going through the slides. We used to do that, I think last year. So I'm happy to sort of bring back that tradition after board meetings. We take out anything that's super confidential, but for regular members, happy to run through the deck.
That'd be great.
That sounds like a great idea. Yes, absolutely. Michael?
You're on mute.
I was just going to ask if there was any more board discussion about funding and so forth. The projects, no projects waiting to hear back on that front. The answer, at least from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, the board was like, sorry, you can't do what you're proposing, but we'll come back to you with a counter proposal, right? So I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion or progress on that.
So I personally missed the prior board meeting where that was initially discussed, so I don't have context. Maybe we'll follow up separately.
We did keep the project directed funding policy. We clarified the language based on the original intent, looking back at the minutes from the board meeting that enacted that policy. So far, no changes, but you can see the project directed fund is, again, the language has been updated to reflect the intent. That's reflected on our website, and I believe Ben linked it to GitHub as well. So
that's all good. I guess either would be good if you help clarify my understanding, and I think what some other people in the project's understanding is we're waiting on a response that says, here's what you can do as a solution to our challenges, right? And so like either it would be good to clarify, nope, sorry, we've this is all the wording you get, you can't do that, or yes, we're still working on it, because like that was my understanding, is like it would become a comeback was gonna be like, yeah, we know you got to do something. Here's what we propose, right? And if that's not the case, it would be good to clarify that so the project knows there's not a follow-on, right? Which is what my understanding was.
And I believe there was some discussion on this topic at a very early discussion phase during the last board call. And so now piecing a better understanding of your question and sort of like my recollection of the board meeting, it feels like um, if you haven't heard back yet, it's because it's still being um, uh, uh, roughly discussed. I mean, not roughly discussed,
And
but like
that's only
it's at
my
a
question.
discussion stage.
Right. That's only my question was like, my understanding it's in that stage. Was there anything discussed? And the answer could be no,
So
but it's
so
still doing that, right? That's
I think we can share that there were discussion, but like I don't think there were made any substantial progress, or like sort of like there's no outcome or output of that discussion at this
okay.
stage.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we've been having discussions just about, different funding models holistically for the foundation and the projects. Because, um, we're in a tough spot, I think, with layoffs and governments cutting back funding and things like that. So we are having those discussions. But if the specific question was, can projects raise X amount of money from specific companies, we're still keeping the project directed funding policy intact as we explore other models. And I'm excited to explore more models with the collab space that Ulysses is helping to lead as well. So that's another good place to brainstorm.
Yeah, maybe I should follow up with Mateo and Toby and just like, I kind of understand the, hey, we still need to discuss this because it's complicated, but like the message that came back on the issue that was open was, we understand the need, we're going to propose something. If it's, and I kind of hear that from Toby, but I'm not as confident after, if you just said, well, we've closed the wording, we've taken up the wording, that's it. Like that makes me less confident. So maybe I should follow up with Toby and Mateo to figure out where we stand.
That works. And also I don't know the issue that you're referring to. I mean, I know that there was an issue, but it wasn't there. So that's also something that would be good for me to have that
And I don't really want to
distract
this meeting. I just
no
was
no
like,
no
hey,
but I think
what's going on? Is there anything?
no
No?
I think this is timely, and it's also the role of the CPC directors to be the voices of the project instead of the board. And so I think it's perfectly appropriate for you as coming from the Node project to come to Joe, Matteo, and I and have a discussion about what it is that you want and whether what kind of things would make that possible. And then we can also have a conversation about sort of the perspective of the board on that topic. And then once we have a bit more clarity, maybe share it more broadly and share it with the CPC. But yes, so please do. Let's make sure that we connect, like at least before the next CPC call, and definitely before the next board call.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
All right, cool. No, thank you, and thank you for raising it and for raising it. Sort of like making a request like understandable to me was my sort of like missing pieces and lack of context here. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
Um,
no problem.
and then we should absolutely follow up, like hopefully in the next CPC call, and share the deck in that context. All right, awesome. Okay, moving on to the updates. I think the only thing where there's still sort of like pending labels that I saw is the loopback array.
Pass.
And then No, you don't have to say anything. I saw your face. No, that's entirely fine. I've been there. I know the feeling. And then there were two, which sort of like requirements for projects releasing internal projects to third-party contributors and requirements for projects ingesting other existing external projects, um, which we are still sort of like pending and open. And we kind of like, I'm wondering if we have a plan for those at some point, or if we should close them and decide that we deal with them on a case-per-case basis. Sort of like, we don't have to discuss this today, but I think it would be nice to come to a close to both of those at some point.
Yeah, I think the advice we got from legal is sort of a gray area. I think it is a case-by-case basis. I know that open visualization folks are, kind of pondering this now on a proposed project and are making a recommendation. So I do like the sort of the case-by-case basis.
So would folks be okay if we close both of these, stating that like this is a case per case basis, and when this is the case, folks who just reach out to the CPC? Because I think like rather than just dragging them around, okay, so let's just do this. And I'm just going to put it directly in the notes here, CPC call. Decision that this should be done on a case per case basis, and projects should reach out to the CPC foundation staff for input. And then I'm just going to close it with comments and close the other one with comments, just the same way. And so the next time, the only issue in that pile will be yours, Joe. Very much looking for next call for this.
Yeah,
All
I'll
right.
work on
I'm
that.
sorry. No, I'm joking. You're good. All right. Moving on to the main part of the agenda. So that's issue 1457. What COC version should we use? And I thought that we had agreement here to just like move to issue number 3. And so I'm not exactly sure what we have to do with this issue.
I thought we had consensus in the last call to move to version 3 or wait for
Right,
version 3. Yes.
Yes, that's my understanding too, but now I'm kind of confused as to what, I mean, there sub items here. Go from 2 to 2.1. So this feels like we have made a decision and it's not clear how to reflect that decision given the items in that issue. Or I'm confused about this issue being more than what the title of the issue is.
Yeah, no, I think that the stuff that says text from 1417, I can probably delete that. It was just kind of giving context as to where this is coming from.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this would just be like CPC consensus to wait for V3, right?
Yeah, although I would encourage folks to look at V3 and make sure that that's, the right decision or help influence the changes that they're making there. I actually got reached out by the one of the folks working on it yesterday to see if we had any input. They had noticed that Ben had joined the Slack, and so they're like, "Oh, hey, you guys interested and want to get involved? Help us, make this better." I think they're really close, so if anybody wants to, they should take a look and comment or let me know if you have anything that I can pass to them.
I read it through. There is a form and I submitted a form with feedback. I mean,
Okay,
I
great.
thought it was, but yeah. So.
Excellent.
So concretely, while I absolutely second your call to getting involved, I also would like to close issues if we can.
Yeah,
And
why
so I'm
don't you
wondering, like,
let me just reach back out to them and maybe even find out if they have a timeline, and then I'll respond in the issue and we can close it. Thinking that that's the direction we'll go in.
okay, so, and then I'm just gonna write here, Joe, to check timeline of V3
Yeah.
and report back here. All right. Cool.
Cool.
That's great. Moving on to CPC director election. That's issue 1451, which I think, I don't know if we've announced the result of the election, though I don't think there was much. Oh, sorry, there's a raised hand here. Chris?
Yeah, sorry. I had to step away for a minute, but this is on the last previous topic. For the contributor covenant code of conduct. I didn't do like a A/B comparison of what was the content of the previous one compared to the new one, but reading the new one, between the encouraged and restricted behaviors, I was wondering what the impact of this is going to be on code of conduct report enforcement. Because in the vast majority of code of conduct incidents that I have dealt with on code of conduct committees, did not fall into the category of restricted behaviors, not, very clear things like slurs or harassment or stuff like that. Usually these are not the things that are reported because those aren't the things that are usually happening. They're much more often happening in the first group of violations or perceived violations or repeated violations of encouraged behavior, general unprofessional, rude behaviors, things of that nature. So I would just like to understand what the association between this code of conduct and how that affects reporting and enforcement.
It sounds from the way that you're phrasing this that there's a specific concern that you might have, or might mis interpreting what you're saying. I just for context, like I haven't read V3, and I don't know what the distinction between the two is.
So I shared the link in the chat. Can you be specific about, I'm looking at the encouraged behavior section. What can you clarify what you're asking?
My question is, if we receive a code of conduct report and the conduct does not fall into one of the categories within the restricted behaviors, does that mean that there can be no enforcement, that the person being reported can simply go, well, this isn't in the restricted behaviors, I didn't do a character attack or a harassment or endangering, so therefore there's no code of conduct issue here?
Number 7 is behaving in other ways that threaten the well-being of our community. I wonder if that covers enough of it, or I mean, I understand what you're asking. I wonder if that covers it, or if we could, if that maybe should be worded differently to be more obviously covering other aspects.
Chris?
I don't know that that's questioned directly to me. I'm just one person.
Oh,
I don't know.
It's okay. I thought Joe was asking
Yeah,
you what your thoughts were about this.
I'm asking you, but also the group. Do people agree that that's enough to cover it?
So
I would, but sorry to interrupt, Toby. I think the
no,
question
please.
is, it for me isn't, does number 7, is that like our, potential for lack of a better word, like loophole, like everything can cover in number 7. I would like to be more explicit and say, is the encouraged behavior also within scope to be, considered, usually these are things like where there's repeated behavior, right? It's one thing to, everybody has bad days. Sometimes we're not as kind and honest and constructive feedback and all that. But when things become, when there's patterns of behavior that I guess you could argue that threaten the well-being of our community, but that language is kind of strong too. I'm just really what I'm asking is the way that the code of conduct written and organized, does that sort of restrict what the code of conduct team can or cannot do in terms of responding to a report, I guess?
Yeah, so
Michael.
I think it's a very good question. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I was gonna say, I think there's like from the Node project's experience, there's kind of there's like the code of conduct, but I don't think the Node project has said that like that's the only thing that applies to the project. There's also cases where people aren't strictly violating the letter of the law of the code of conduct, but the ongoing, and I think it gets a little bit to your point of like, if there's a behavior that is repeated and is like over time builds up to something which is adverse to the project, then there's still the need to take some action. And I guess, so it's like, are you saying that the code of conduct committee only strictly enforces what's in the code of conduct, or if that is one of the things that enforces, might address Chris's point, right? Like it could also be that like the code of conduct committee's scope is, yes, code of conduct specific things, but also these other things which fall into often a more gray area. Like for example, in the Node project, the code of conduct, like we have a moderation team. They enforce the code of conduct. They do a great job of that, but they basically said we don't go into these gray areas, and so the TSC ends up handling those. For the CPC, it could easily be scoped as it does both of those, but maybe that's worth calling out versus, based on the name, people thinking, oh, well, you're only going to enforce this very specific thing.
All right, so I think those are great questions, and I think it is important for us as we decide to adopt the version of the COC, like version 3, when it is final, that we consider this when we adopt it. That said, and to Joe's earlier point, I think it would be really valuable to go bring that input and those concerns directly to the folks working on V3 right now. Because I think that's going to be more effective.
And if I could just jump in real quickly, Chris, Chris and Michael and I and the person that I'm talking to that's working on this all work at IBM, so we can huddle up and chat more about this, especially with Michael and Chris, your experience in code of conduct work and enforcement and moderation and whatnot. I think this would be a really good discussion to have for them to bring back to their group. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, thanks. I don't mind the interjection, and that's helpful to know. And I just pasted in the chat kind of the thing I'm highlighting, which is like in the section about restricted behaviors, it says explicitly these are violations of the code of conduct. And then later in the enforcement section, it says if the investigation finds that code of conduct has in fact been violated. This is the thing where I would be concerned, because if somebody is claiming, well, I didn't violate the code of conduct because I didn't do these things in this list, and you're reaching, that would basically kill any code of conduct enforcement for the most part, because it's been my experience that it's never in that category and always in the former category. And that's, of course, there's that number 7 thing that could be broad, but not, saying that it threatens I don't know, the language is a little interesting. Anyway, so all that makes sense, though, everybody's comments, Robin.
Yeah, I would encourage you to put it in writing, though, in that form. I did the same. They removed,
Okay.
I feel like they have a couple of loopholes. They described groups who could be discriminated against, and they specifically removed age this year, are in this version. But they just put end other status, so anyhow, feels like we would add more, not remove some, but I did document it in a feedback.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to drop it into the form, which is in that issue. Any comments? Michael?
My last 2 cents is, like, I personally feel it's actually it's like a separate thing. Like the code of conduct attempts to close a particular category of things. And like, so trying like to try and get that other category in is going to be really tough. So it's almost like leave that as its own category. I'm sure they've done a great job of putting together what's there. And if there's specific feedback on that, great. But I would be like, on our side, maybe we should just make it clear that the Code of Conduct Committee handles specific code of conduct violations. And, you know, we're willing to go, our plan is to go to 3 because, like, why not? But these other things are handled separately, right? Like, you can't just say, well, I didn't do one of the 3 things in the code of conduct, then we can never take an action, right? Like that's, so I guess I'm just trying to say is I think they're different things, and treating them as different things will be better than trying to get changes to the code of conduct like the V3 to try to cover them both. That's all.
Yeah. Chris?
So we do cover moderation specifically separately in the COC policy, just for context. Chris?
Yeah, we can probably move on, but just on Robin's comment about the age being removed, and I was just sort of looking at, okay, what thing covers ageism now? And I guess it's going to be number 6 on stereotyping, on the basis of immutable identities or traits. And I just sort of chuckled because age is mutable, right? Your age is constantly changing, right? But if it's not that one, I don't.
Yeah, but when you're old, you're old. I mean, you're young, you're young.
You're immutably old?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, up until you die, you know.
The hair starts
Anyway.
off a little gray and gets grayer, as some of my colleagues will know here. All right, we can move on. Thank you.
Just really quickly, in closing on this topic, I didn't mean to be excluding anyone. If you're interested in this conversation, once we get a time figured out, I'm happy to add other folks outside of IBM into our conversation with the groups there.
Yeah,
Cool.
Thanks for the openness here. And I totally understand this is easy to set up as a quick chat, like and so no harm done whatsoever. All right, so let's move on. Let's move on to let's move on to 1451 election of CPC directors. I don't know if any announcement was made on this topic, but it's also fairly straightforward. There were 3 candidates for 3 seats, and those were the incumbents. And so Joe, Matteo, and I will be serving another term on the board. Thank you all for voting for us. That was very, very, very kind. Most importantly, I think some of the discussions we had at the beginning of this, in terms of making the communication between the CPC and board, continuing to improve this is something that we really, really want to do, and continuing, in projects and leveraging us 3 as resources that bring back their concerns to the board is really important. So thank you, Michael, for raising this. And Robin, you had something.
I was just going to add, I did send an email to the CPC private list, which are all the regular members, about the results of the election. The new members, our directors, start on May 1st. We do have a blog drafted that will be going out for the rest of the world on the change. We do have one change, new face on the board. Other folks are reelected as well. So we'll be making a public announcement probably in the next day or 2.
All right. Wonderful. Okay, so I think we can close this issue. And yes, thank you for Kate running the process this year. very well organized. We've made tremendous progress from the days where we're doing elections all the time to like this is a thing that just happens. All right. Proposal to add a services.md or similar documentation to OpenJS projects. Ben, we chatted about this a few times already. And I think there were quite some concerns raised in the last call about the security aspects of this. And I'm not sure where sort of like where that left us or what the next.
The next step here was to bring this to the security collab space, and that happened in a meeting that I missed. So I'm waiting to, because I was on PTO, I'm waiting to regroup with Rudd. It wasn't discussed in the last meeting we had on Monday. There were some other topics. So I'll try to wrap up that feedback and get a direction on what we want to do here before the next meeting.
All right, so I guess no update and same notes as the past call apply here. Moving on quite quickly because we don't have a lot of time left. Code of conduct, plan of action, remaining items. Is this something that we want to talk about now? Do we need more work? Is this the working session for next week? Like, what's the status here?
I think that's a great question. Where is it? Code of conduct action plan. Is this the one? Do we capture?
It's 1417.
Yeah. 1417. So there's the .github, aspect to this. And then sorry, I'm trying to find the other issue that's related. Because we did take notes. Where am I here? Oh, that's the wrong one. No. Here, this one. So 1417, sorry, the description, the first item, item 1, sub-issue 1, update onboarding and post-graduation checklists. We kind of talked about that, and we talked about what sort of guidance and maybe even requirements we would have on projects for how to manage their code of conduct. And so we kind of talked through that a bit and put down some things in issue 1255, which I can drop a link to here. Jordan commented, which I haven't seen his last comment here. But basically, we wanted to, in updating like the project onboarding checklist, we wanted to have really clear direction on what we expect of our projects and what we might encourage of our projects in terms of the code of conduct, work. So we started to try to capture that. I think it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to work on it again next week and further flesh it out. I think we kind of got high level stuff, but we could put some, straw man language around what we think we would propose, and then the CPC can kind of go from there.
That sounds great. So two things. A plan is for this to be a working session for next week. Okay, and B, I just want to make sure that because I haven't followed like those working sessions at all, but there is in the COC policy, there's a whole section on delegation to projects, which I'm adding to the thing here. Just want to make sure that you haven't missed this in the process because it's quite it's fairly explicit. There's
Okay.
probably a whole bunch missing, but I just want to make sure that like you're adding to this and not doubling that existing effort.
Yeah. I'm going to make a note of this in the issue 1255. So in the working session, we can kind of compare and make sure we're not overlapping or whatever.
Yeah, and if and if there are corrections to make to this, that's perfectly appropriate, of course, right?
Yeah.
We'll make sure that we don't end up with two conflicting pieces of governance.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on here to the next item. I can find where that is. There we go. And yeah, native script TSC charter. So actually I had a call and a bunch of conversations was God, I'm gonna completely blank on is it Nathan?
Yep.
Yes. I'm so bad with names. Apologies if you're listening. So the TSC there has prepared like a charter, and going to submit it to the CPC fairly soon. So I had a they shared like a first draft with me, which is like really good. And so I'm looking forward to being able to essentially close those two issues with an actual updated charter from native script that like matches a template that we use. So that's the update on yeah, 1387 and 1386. And yes, I have missed 1391. And thank you for bringing that up. So 1391, if I remember correctly, what happened was we approved a Node.js charter change, but the issue actually was referencing two other changes, and I don't think anyone was aware of this when we approved things. And so the idea was we need to go back and actually look at all three changes and make sure that we approve all three and not accidentally approve three while thinking we're approving just one. I don't think any of it was contentious. It was just more to make sure that we were doing things properly. Is this is my understanding the same as other people's? Yes. I haven't looked at the other changes, and so I'm wondering, have other people done that, and which are they, and are they happy with it? So it's like 1360 and 1650. Is that correct?
So we did review 1650 at some point, and we had some feedback. We had some looks good to me from some folks, and that one's already been merged. So maybe we could just consider that one done and dusted, which means the only remaining one is 1360.
Yeah, and I see some comments from you, Michael. I don't know if you have any context that would be helpful for the group or anything.
Sorry, on which one?
TSC 1360.
Okay.
Concentrate responsibilities rather than its voting member on the TSC rather than its voting members.
Right, okay. So yeah, that was, I mean, I think that it's a really just a very subtle thing, because yeah, I was involved in the discussion there, is like it's meant to be that like the TSC represents the project as a whole, not any one of its individual members. So I think that's like the author's goal was to make it clear that like just because I'm on the TSC doesn't mean I now represent the project. So it's intended to say the TSC as a whole has that responsibility and authority, not the members because you happen to be part of the TSC. Does that make sense? It's very subtle, and the wording in the end change is very subtle, right? Like
to put it another way, how I read it is that there is the TSC, and some members of the TSC are voting members. Actually, more than half are technically voting members. And previously, the way this charter is written is that only the TSC voting members are subject to such policies and all this other, and it's just changing the language to include the entire TSC rather than just the voting members.
That's perhaps how the wording started out, but in the end, like, that was, from my perspective, and what we had the discussion in there is, we do have regular member, I think we call them regular members, but they're really not very active. So like, it's still the TSC voting members who represent the project. And so through the discussion, I think it reflects now more what I was saying is like and the goal was that it's not individuals who end up having those, you know, that have those responsibilities. And I guess perhaps you would say, like, you know, ability to do things. It's the TSC as a whole. And so the regular members versus voting members was kind of like taken out of the discussion in the update. Right, like you see in the first thing, this has been removed. This PR should not have any effect for regular members. Right, like it wasn't trying to say, it used to say voting members, and voting members could do certain things, and now voting members and regular members could do that. No, that was removed. It was just meant to say and clarify that it's the TSC as a group versus the voting members.
In the interest of time, I had Megan on was their hand raised before. You lowered your hand. Are you good?
Yeah, just that was also going to be my question of like, was the previous language set the way it was because they had a similar setup as the CPC where they have voting members and regular members? And if like that change in language now includes regular members in like voting members' responsibilities.
So if we dug up the earlier issues, again, it might become a little bit complicated in that, like in some of the previous discussions, I pointed out that, like, well, yes, the wording was based on what the CPC did, but it's not really the same thing. So it's a different situation. So like, I think the wording, yes, was borrowed. And my point was that, like, maybe we should not have the regular members because it's really not the same thing. And through the discussion is like, well, no, that wasn't the intention to make it exactly the same thing. We just reuse some of the naming. And so this is not intended to change anything in terms of who can do what and what rights people have. Like in the end, you can see it still says that, you know, when the consensus cannot be reached, it's the TSC voting members who will make the decision.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're eating over the private session that we really need to have. And I also don't think that it's really for the CPC to debate like the specifics of the node charter, just to essentially decide whether the charter changes make sense and should be approved or not. I frankly believe that this has been open for quite a while. It's fairly straightforward. And I don't think it's the CPC's role to go like dig into the, you know, the details and the specifics of this. Or if we hadn't wanted to, we should have done this like in my opinion earlier and directly with the node project. I don't know how other people feel, but I think we should just approve this and move to the private session. Chris, are you okay? Did I like, or do you have something that's relevant to this that you absolutely want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm confused. I don't disagree with your take there, Toby, but I'm confused by Michael's comments because what he's saying, and I may be misunderstanding, seems to be in direct contradiction with what I'm reading in the TSC charter and the changes there. But if we need to move on, let's move on.
I think we should, and I think because I read the same thing as Michael here, it seems fairly straightforward in that sense too, like from the changes themselves. So I
The
really don't
changes
have
seem
this concern.
straightforward to me, but it's the interpretation that is confusing to me. But
Right, but I get that, but like yeah, I think we should just +1 it and close it on our end, and then move into the private session. And if someone wants to object, that's entirely fine, and we'll do it in 2 weeks. I'm fine with this. That's entirely cool too. So with this said, I think we should close the CPC session. Thank you all for attending, and see you in 2 weeks. And we can stop recording.